Tales from a Jurassic World, Season 3, Episode 2, Cunning Connection.
Morrison, I'm 10 minutes away. Pack up at the pier, and then the guy by the dinghy will be moving out shortly. Over.
Understood, Brent. See you shortly.
Ben Morrison had been working for Biosyn for several weeks at this point, and he was becoming increasingly familiar with ongoing meetings that he was having with agents like Michael Brent. More and more, Morrison found himself deployed to new and exotic locations as a part of his role tracking down new assets. He'd spent time in Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and now here he was in the Netherlands, in a small village on the coast not too far from Amsterdam. He and Brent had been briefed on the recovery of an asset from a mutual informant, and although King hadn't been particularly forthcoming with information, it wasn't the first time that Morrison had been deployed to reappropriate a private asset. As Morrison pulled his car to a halt, he got out of the vehicle and stepped into the fresh European rain. He picked his way down the hill from the car park where he had parked, coming across a small pier where a rigid hull inflatable boat was moored. A single man in an orange life jacket device and waterproof uniform stood next to the vehicle, waving at Morrison as he walked towards him.
You Morrison?
That's me. Why are we heading offshore? Isn't the weather too challenging for this?
Boss thinks it's safer to exchange the asset away from prying eyes. Containers on an old cargo ship. We'll take you out there.
Gotcha.
Morrison stood in the rain for a few moments, shivering. About 10 minutes passed and a second vehicle pulled up. A younger man sprinting down towards him in a rain jacket with the hood pulled tightly over his head. Brent was much younger than Morrison, and he was far too overly enthusiastic about his job. Morrison didn't like it. He seemed to scarcely understand the risk of the work they were doing, and was, by all accounts, a bit of an idiot, but Morrison wouldn't tell him that. He greeted the man, and then they began to climb into the rib as it rocked on the waves. After a few moments, the man in the waterproofs untethered the vessel from the dock, and it began to pull out into the choppy waves beyond, towards the large, looming shape of a cargo vessel which lingered on the horizon in front of them. As the rain hammered the vessel more, Morrison attempted to make his voice heard over the noise.
Why the hell is this meet happening on a cargo ship?
Beats me if I know, Morrison. I assume the guy we're meeting with thinks it's safer to keep the animals away from the mainland. Can't say I disagree.
Any idea what we're dealing with?
Velociraptor.
Say that again?
Velociraptor from Isla Sorna.
Hell.
A few minutes passed on the tumultuous, stomach-churning ride out to the cargo ship, but eventually Morrison and Brent docked with the vessel and were led on board by the person wearing the flotation device. They passed a handful of armed guards on the top deck of the vessel and were led down some metal stairs into the bows of the ship, where the hold now held a container with an animal inside. Even from the catwalk encircling the hold, Morrison could already hear the creature, screeching and whining from inside its containment as it attempted to break free. The cage it was held in was surrounded by other cargo containers and shipping crates, and a handful of men with firearms and tranquilizer rifles were stood around the area. As Morrison and Brent got onto the same level as the creature, Morrison walked up closer to the animal, attempting to get a closer look despite its protested swipes at the metal mesh in front of it. It was Morrison's first time being this close to a velociraptor. They weren't the most common animal to encounter, with the bulk of the specimens on the mainland now largely coming from Isla Sorna. The animal in front of him was one of those creatures, its grey skin pebbled with black patterns, almost resembling some kind of natural camouflage. The animal possessed a white stripe which ran from its head down to its tail, and a crimson tip at the apex of the tail. Morrison didn't know what was more striking, the sharp claws on the toes of the animal, or the red eyes and pointed quills which jutted out from the creature's head. As he took in the scale of the animal in front of him, Morrison was taken aback when a familiar voice called from around the corner of the container.
Mr. Morrison, Mr. King assures me that this animal will be safe in your company.
Anton Orlov walked around the corner, wearing a smartly pressed black suit complete with a black tie and a metallic tie clasp. His smartly cropped hair was pressed neatly to his head, and the same gnarled smile which Morrison had seen many months earlier twisted onto the man's face. Morrison gasped as he saw him, his body tightening. Orlov sensed this and raised 2 hands forward, palms open in a peaceful gesture.
Relax, please. I struck deal with King and the CIA, and am helping with the reappropriation of some assets. The men around you are just here to see that it occurs safely.
You should be behind bars.
Perhaps. But it would appear that the world has other plans for me right now. Where is that pretty lady who was with you the last time I had the pleasure of encountering you?
Morrison felt his blood boil. The ship suddenly lurched, sending containers and shipping crates smashing into the walls of the hold. The mechanical connection holding the Velociraptor containment cage in place suddenly let out a metallic groan before it snapped sideways, smashing into the wall. Ignoring this for a moment, Morrison focused his full attention on Orlov.
Don't you dare talk about her. You don't get to talk about her.
The ship lurched again, but the 2 men continued to ignore it as they focused on staring each other down.
Why not?
Orlov asked as a cruel smile crossed his face. Morrison clenched his fists, stepping forward to swing at the man, but in an instant everything changed as the Velociraptor cage smashed into the wall again, the connection now loose enough for it to drop to the floor entirely. Sparks flew from the control panel on the side, and the grated hatch swung open, allowing the animal to escape into the hold. Orlov's men, still attempting to get back to their feet following the sudden and unexpected movement in the water, were too slow to react, and the animal pounced on one of them, biting into the man's jugular in a swift movement which smeared the wall with blood. Morrison got to his feet and sprinted behind himself, heading deeper into the latticework of metal containers, Brent hot behind him.
We need to run!
As the 2 men got deeper into the cargo hold, they paused to catch their breath behind containers, listening to the chaos around them. A couple of gunshots rang out, followed by a howl from the Velociraptor, and then a scream, presumably from one of Orlov's other men in the hold.
We need to get out of here, now!
No, we need to be careful. This thing is a predator. If we run, it will run faster than us. Game over.
Another scream came from around the corner as the Velociraptor found another victim, and Morrison motioned for Brent to move with him. Up ahead was the wall of the cargo hold, and Morrison could see that there was a bulkhead door. If they could get through the door and seal it, they would be safe from the Velociraptor, and would be able to get help. Brent, noticing the bulkhead as well, sprinted past Morrison, heading for the doorway.
Damn it, Brent, get back here!
Morrison went to sprint after the man, but he was too late. Brent made it through the doorway, pulling it shut and sealing the bulkhead with a thud. Morrison hammered on the door, attempting to get Brent to open it.
Open the goddamn door, you idiot!
Behind him, a pair of red eyes were locked firmly on him, the Velociraptor almost gesticulating its jaw in a hungry motion as it crept closer and closer. From this distance, Morrison could clearly make out the crimson blood which now peppered the animal's teeth and jaw, and could also see bloodstains on the animal's claws where it had attacked other workers. The animal left crimson prints smeared on the floor as it got closer and closer still, contorting its body in an almost alien fashion as it twisted through the debris of containers and crates. As the animal began to crouch closer towards the floor, almost like a predatory cat in the way it prepared to leap into the air, Morrison knew that this would be the end. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do. The velociraptor made a growling noise, clearly ready to pounce. He shut his eyes, clenching them tightly as he let out a single sentence. His last sentence.
I'm sorry, Lucy.
Morrison stood for a few moments, the noise reverberating through the hold of the cargo ship. He gingerly opened his eyes. The velociraptor was now lying on the ground mere inches away, the feathered end of a tranquilizer dart sticking out of the animal's chest as it wheezed and spasmed slightly on the floor. The dosage had clearly been a little bit higher than needed, but it had done the job. Morrison followed down the body of the animal until his eyes fell on a pair of feet, and then he looked up. Anton Orlov was stood opposite him, clutching a tranquilizer rifle in his hand, the same wide-eyed grin now back on his face.
Like I was saying, Mr. Morrison, we're on the same side now. But come on, we still have much work to do in order to get this animal ready for transit.
A couple of hours passed as the crew of the vessel worked on cleaning things up and recontaining the velociraptor. Morrison was now stood above on the deck, the weather having cleared significantly since their first arrival. He was watching as the deck crew helped Brent to load up the animal into a waiting Chinook helicopter which had arrived, the rhythmic thumping of the helicopter's dual rotor blades now filling the air around him. He wasn't done with Brent. He was going to have a conversation with him, and he wasn't sure he would like it. But for now, he had more pressing matters. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a mobile phone. He dialed a number. The phone rang for a couple of tones, and then the recipient picked up.
This is King.
Why the hell didn't you tell me Orlov was involved in this?
Whoa, Morrison. Calm the hell down. You're the rule breaker in this thing, remember? Besides, our assets aren't always going to come from the cleanest of places, and that's something you need to get used to. Anton is doing us a favor, and in doing so, it keeps him out of prison.
You should have told me, King.
And here I thought you wanted to keep these animals safe. Isn't that what you promised to do in the memory of your partner? This is how you do it. Now, you can either get with the program, or I'll have you sat behind the desk at the DPW. Am I being crystal clear?
Fine.
Morrison answered, slamming his finger on the hang-up key as he leant on the railing and looked out at the ocean for a few moments. Biosyn were becoming increasingly important in recontaining these animals. He knew that, and getting them out of the hands of illicit and private dealers like Orlov made sense. But something wasn't right. This all felt too convenient. It was almost as if there was something that King wasn't telling Morrison. King wasn't wrong though. Morrison had promised Lucy he'd protect these animals. But would she have ever condoned something like this? Was he protecting them, or was he becoming part of a bigger problem? He sighed and looked out across the water. He wasn't sure he wanted to visit the Netherlands again. You have been listening to Tales from a Jurassic World. Ben Morrison voiced by Jared Ransom. Howard King voiced by Antonio Bustos, Michael Brent voiced by Connor Ontology, Doc Worker voiced by Brooks Newsom, Anton Orlov voiced by Jane Malone, music arranged and composed by Brooks Leiby, intro and outro music performed by the famed Studio Orchestra, sound effects from Epidemic Sound, written, created and produced by Tom Jurassic. Tales from a Jurassic World follows Biosyn as they adapt to dinosaurs in the wild.